And I'm going to take off the feather of my elliptical marquee, and let's give this a go, shall we? Click from the center while holding Alt and Shift, and make it a size that's between the edges of your outer darker blue color and the inner lighter blue color. So as you can see, that's right in between there. And go over to the bottom right hand corner and make a new layer. And we're just going to call this UL Glow for upper left hand glow. And we're going to fill this in by hitting Shift Backspace and using white like usual. And I want to go ahead and click it to deselect, or hit Control D if you're on a PC, or Command D on a Mac if you like to use your shortcuts. And we're going to go back and give our elliptical marquee tool the 30 feather pixel that we are going to be using oh so much today. And we're going to make a slightly imperfect circle on the upper left hand corner of our button right here. And right about there should be about good, but we're going to want to invert it by hitting Control Shift I. And then, like we have a couple times already, we're going to hit Backspace or Delete about 2 times. And that should leave just a small portion of our white circle that we had just before. And I'll hit Control D to deselect. And I want to lower the opacity of this into the 80s or 70s. Right about there looks okay to me. And so the next thing we're going to want to add is 2 little dots for some specular highlights. So I'm going to make 2 new layers, call them upper left hand speck and bottom right hand speck. And I'm going to go to my upper left hand speck and take off our feather. So once you've got your feather taken off, we're just going to make a very small oval in the upper left hand portion of our button, and I'm going to fill it up with white like we have a million times by using Shift Backspace or Option Delete if you're on a Mac. Sorry if I didn't mention that earlier. And we'll hit OK, and we'll deselect it like we have the umpteenth time. And we're just going to bring up the transform tool by hitting Control T if you're on a PC, or Command D if you're on a Mac. And we're just going to turn it a little bit by clicking and dragging outside the box here. And if you're happy with how much you've turned it, then you can go ahead and hit the Enter key, or just push this little check mark up here. And using the Move tool, we'll position it right around here towards the center of our upper left hand glow over there. So let's go ahead and make another one of these bad boys in the bottom right hand corner, but have it a little bit smaller. Fill it up with white and deselect it. Go to our Move tool and transform it with Control T. Oops. I forgot to mention that. Here, let me do Control Alt Z to undo that. You actually need to do this on the bottom right hand speck layer. I forgot to mention that, but no big deal. Let's go ahead and fill this up. Let's see, now we need to bring up the transform tool by hitting Control T, give it a little bit of a turn, hit the Enter key, and we'll position it right about there. Okay, so far so good. We've got a nice color going. We've got quite a few glows and highlights going on to give the button a little bit more of a shiny look. Now let's go ahead and give it a metal border, shall we? To do that, what we're going to do is make a new layer, and we're going to call this, might as well just call this Slim Trim. And with the Slim Trim layer selected, we're going to control click the thumbnail for the stroke layer down here, and that should load it as a selection. And what we're going to do with that is actually go up to Select, Modify, Expand. And how much you expand it is up to you, but I'm going to go with a 4 pixel expansion. And we're just going to hit OK, and as you can see, it made the selection 4 pixels larger. So with Slim Trim still selected, we're going to hit Control Backspace because black is our background color down here. And I'm just going to deselect with Control D, and I'm going to move Slim Trim down here below the stroke. And before I go anywhere else, I'm going to give this baby a gradient overlay. And so let's go ahead and change up our gradient a little bit. I'm going to drag this white slider down here to about 50%-ish. And I'm going to drag the black to about 20%. Now we have our black pointer at location 20%, and we have our white pointer at location 50%. Okay, so now with our modified gradient, we're going to lower the opacity down to about 90%, I think, or lower. Let's actually go a little bit lower. Let's actually go into about 60%. And we're actually going to reverse the gradient, and we're going to change the angle to about 110 degrees. And we're just going to call that good and hit OK. And as you can see, now we've got a little bit of a nice gradient going around our button here. But let's go ahead and make a second one. So we'll close this up by clicking that little arrow right there. And we'll make another layer. Let's just call this the larger trim, I suppose you can call it. Drag it on below. And this time we're actually going to go back to our elliptical marquee tool, make sure we don't have a feather on it, and click and drag from the center while holding Alt and Shift. And how big you make it is completely up to you, but I'm going to go with right about there. And I'm going to fill this up with black like we did before by hitting Control Backspace, since black is our background color. And let's go ahead and give this a gradient overlay as well, but real quick I want to deselect it first by hitting Control D. So let's go ahead and give it that gradient overlay. And like we did before, let's give it an angle of 110 degrees. And I believe the default gradient is just fine, but I want to lower the opacity just a tad. And you know what? I've changed my mind. Let's put the opacity back up to 100%. And I'm actually going to change the black to more of a dark gray, maybe a darker. And then I'm going to change the white to a lighter gray, a little bit lighter. And I'm thinking that's looking alright right there. So we'll hit OK, OK, and OK a third time. And there we go. We've got a shiny metallic looking button. But I'm going to go ahead and take it a step further by putting a logo in there. So off to the side, I'm going to close up the larger trim's effects panel right there. I'm going to go to the center layer right here and create a new layer by hitting this create new layer icon in the bottom right hand corner. I'm just going to call this logo. And I've already made our logo into a brush, so I'm going to bring that up real fast. And I want this to be white, so I'm going to click this icon right here and this one right there, so that way it sets the colors to default and then switches them around. And I'm going to use my left bracket key to size it down a little bit and give that a little bit of a click. And there we go. That's our logo. But to give it a little bit more of that round kind of 3D-ish kind of feel, I'm going to grab my move tool and bring up the transform tool by hitting Control T. I'm just going to turn it ever so slightly and hit the enter key. And we're just going to give this another gradient overlay. Don't you guys just love these things? You're going to have to bring down this this white, whatever it's called. I called it something earlier, but I kind of forgot. I'm going to bring that down to about 50%, and I'm going to bring this up to maybe 10%. And I'm going to hit OK, and lower the opacity just a touch. And that looks okay to me. Let's bring that back up to 75%, and we'll hit OK. And that's looking pretty awesome as it is, but I actually feel like giving it a little bit more of a highlight in the upper right hand and the upper left hand corners.